Okay, here we are, Nations in Arms. Back to it. This is the 1805 scenario set up. You've got everybody who's involved. You know, Poland is so confusing to me. I don't know why, just because the provinces are hard for me to keep track of. In the last scenario, West Galicia was part of Poland, supposedly 1, 2, 3, 4. I could have put a depot here and thus cut off the Lemberg connection. Curious if there's still shit going on up at the park. It's like Tuesday going into Wednesday, right about midnight, and I was kind of sleeping, and then, I don't know, people revving cars and I think drag racing on the street behind me on the park. Just nasty shit going on back there. But anyway, woke me up after about an hour of sleeping, as soon as my video ran out. All right. I've set everything up. Pain in the fucking ass, because the counters, now I'm into those counters that like are almost impossible to read for the leaders. Had to pull my better glasses out, and even with those I can't read most of the time what's on the counters with the dark blue band on them. These guys, that's readable. With the zoom, should use the camera. Even with the fucked up view screen it is. Anyway, there were a series of rules to this game that I did not cover that are in the playbook. And they handle the multiplayer diplomacy, and I think I also left out the creating states, although that's pretty minor. Let's take a brief look at these. Well, we're not going to, work our way through reading them all, inch by inch, I hope. But basically, you can only negotiate during the negotiations phase of the spring turn. Now that's different from the spring interphase, which happens on every turn. During all other turns, players can communicate only through written messages. It's called postmail. But then there's an option to let people negotiate any turn. Outside of spring, players must use written, and now postmail is an optional rule, which appears to be necessary here. Outside of spring, you must use written messages. These letters are collected and delivered during diplomacy of the next turn. So I guess you write your negotiations, and then it actually doesn't come into people's hands until else when. So if Russia writes to Austria in winter, the letter will be delivered at the beginning of the spring turn. Well, that's useless. Any other month or season, sure, but okay. The concept of blocks. So this is in order to handle the mechanisms of the chit cup over there, because there's two sides, coalition and empire, and then there's a neutral set of chits. The bloc is an alliance of any number of powers, including at least one player. It can be anything from one player to 6 of the players. In a 7-player game, there can theoretically be 7 different blocks if nobody's allied. All allies in the bloc are members. The senior member is the leader of the bloc. Seniority is reverse diplomatic sequence order, so Britain and France will be the senior members of their blocs. Okay, that's defined. I thought it wasn't. Yeah, now we're reading through everything. There'll always be at least 2 blocks, the empire led by France and the coalition led by Britain, or sometimes Austria if Britain's been knocked out. Well, conceivably neither of them. The game will be over if everything's knocked out, though. Scenarios start with these two blocs at war and the rest of the major powers neutral. Only one member of a bloc can use a public event each turn. So this was one of the things that I brought up earlier was, each player gets their own hand of cards and everything. That's still true, and more cards are going to be dealt out of the deck each turn. But for public events, each bloc can only fire off a single public event. And they must, I guess. When there's several blocs, use the initiative markers, Empire for French, Coalition for the British or anti-French. But the other blocs have to determine at the time their bloc is formed which initiative markers, Empire or Coalition, will control their activations. Now this is kind of weird because then it means that there's no neutral player phases from how I'm reading it. And there's a bunch of chits for the neutrals, which kind of should be there. I feel like you should only worry about blocs if you're actually involved in a war. Anyway, the other blocs have to determine which initiative markers, Empire or Coalition, controls them. This choice is final. If major powers can't agree, the highest ranking major power on the diplomacy track. Now, again, none of this has anything to do with warfare, right? So, like, let's say Russia decides it's in the coalition bloc and Prussia decides it's in the coalition bloc and neither one's at war, but they go to war with each other. Then the horribly anomalous situation of two of them using the same chit would happen, which is just bad. You don't want that to happen. It might happen, it might be forced to happen under some circumstances, but again, I feel like a bloc shouldn't be forced, it shouldn't be using one of the two main chit groupings unless that bloc is at war with something. Okay, we'll continue on. Bloc friction. Okay, and then they say here, the movement of the blocs that with neither France nor Britain are executed before France and Britain's movements, which could be an advantage or a disadvantage. And if necessary, use diplomacy phase order for the movements, which ends up getting rid of that whole chit pull type idea, which again, it just feels to me like a bloc should only be a bloc if it's at war with something. Like it should only count as a bloc for the initiative chits. Bloc friction, any number of situations may require that a multiplayer bloc make a joint decision. The basic rule is that the bloc holds a simple majority vote between the players, senior member having a final tiebreaker. And then everybody has to decide in the bloc whether they abide by the decision or break with an alliance. And this is if an alliance is requested, if there's a peace to accept by one of its enemies, or whether to offer a negotiated peace, whether the bloc should join one of its members in a declaration of war made by it, and whether the bloc, if neutral, should join another bloc when attacked, or remain in its own bloc. If a member of the bloc has been declared war upon, all other members have to join the war or break the alliance. This is not part of a voting situation. So, unlike some games which have things like a distinction between offensive and which have a distinction between a defensive and an offensive defensive alliance, or even possibly a pure offensive alliance for games like Empires and Arms, Empires of the Middle Ages, which allow for a very, very fluid sort of treaty disposition. This kind of defines whether or not the bloc supports an offensive alliance is by the vote of the bloc as a whole. And now that would include, I guess, the person calling for their allies. And of course, Not everybody has to follow. They can break the alliance, but there's a cost to that. Anyway, in the diplomatic sequence, each player takes his turn to announce whether this is kind of like the two-player game, whether they request an alliance, request another agreement, an entente, break an alliance, or declare war on a major or minor power. When the players make their announcements one at a time, the procedure is halted temporarily, resolving it depending on which one it is. So if you request an alliance with another player, that player immediately gets a choice to confirm or decline. If the alliance is confirmed, it's effective immediately and the two players are now allies. If neither of them were allied to a player previously, they form an alliance and a new bloc. If the requesting player is already allied to someone else, he and his allies must first agree before they can extend their alliance to a third player. If the invited player is already allied to someone else, he and his ally must first agree whether to accept the alliance request. It's possible for a player to request an alliance with just a single player, even if he is allied to other players. Okay. What does that mean? As a player can only be part of one alliance at a given time. If he enters another alliance, okay, he must break his old one now out of sequence. So I guess you have to kind of specify, hey, Austria, I want to join your alliance. And then anybody in that alliance can say, you know, they can vote in according to normal bloc rules. Or you could say, hey, Austria, I want you to ally with me and no one else. A player can offer an entente agreement with another player. This is basically an agreement to do things that's not requiring the alliance rules. The other party gets a chance to confirm, and if so, the entente is effective immediately. An entente does not require an alliance to be in place, but they can be combined. An entente can include naval transport of one another's troops. An interesting little functionality, passage through territory, transfer of money, transfer of owned provinces, transfer of minor ally control, and transfer of event cards. That's a whole lot of shit you can hand off, including event cards, which one wouldn't kind of think are normally transferable. But anyway, an entente cannot include stacking together, which is only possible for allies. A player cannot transfer away a province owned by one of his controlled minor allies, so you can't, like, give away a part of Bavaria or of Sweden. A transfer is performed then and there, cannot be revoked. This includes transfer of money, which is one way in which players can use money outside the economic phase. Such transfer is subject to the limits on the accounts. Other promises are valid only for the current turn. Wow. I guess that includes things like passage. But what's not clear is, does it include things like you will declare war or you will attack here? None of that's specified in here. I don't think those are enforceable under the Entente at all. Mandatory alliances. Now remember, during a war, a mandatory alliance, a peace can result in a mandatory alliance. It can be broken during this gets weird. It can be broken during a diplomacy phase without losing a victory point, but only if the involved major power joins an alliance, including other major powers at war with the former ally and conqueror. That only leaves things in an interesting position, and you'll see in a moment. The defeated power grants the use of its territory to the victor for the duration of the mandatory alliance. The victor still has to maintain his own supply line, but can use the defeated power's fortresses as supply links. Now we go to breaking an alliance. Some situations may require a player to break an alliance out of sequence, but it may also be broken voluntarily as one of his own announcements. A player cannot break an alliance if he has units in any ally's territory. This means he must accept a bloc vote result. By the way, the mandatory alliance has a certain time limit on it, and I think you're still constrained by that. This just is breaking a mandatory alliance beyond the time limit. Okay, you can't break it if you have troops in any ally's territory. This means you have to accept a bloc vote result. There's no bloc vote result which allows somebody out of an alliance, but it sounds like there is here. Or what it may mean, no, what it means is, let's say a bloc decides to declare war to support an attack. You would be forced to declare war under those circumstances because you had troops in an ally's territory. You can't just bail that way. Feels a little restrictive, but okay, stay out of your allies. You can break an alliance only. Oh, he can break an alliance if any ally has units in his or her controlled power's territory. Units of former ally are teleported to the closest friendly supply source. Again, kind of weird. You might be able to misuse that to force march units quickly or something. Units of the former ally are immediately teleported. Yeah, breaking an alliance costs a victory point. Now here we go. A player in a mandatory alliance can break that alliance only in the diplomacy phase at the loss of 1 victory point. Whereas up here, it can be broken during a diplomacy phase without losing, but only if he joins an alliance. I think this is an extension of the you can break it only in diplomacy phase at the cost of a victory point. I think you can normally break it at a cost of a victory point, whereas this seems to indicate that you can only break a mandatory alliance at no cost if you immediately join a war against them. But I think instead that this is, I don't want to put it, it's sort of an exceptional situation to this other thing, but they're in the wrong order and not near each other and blah, blah, blah. It may also be broken with no loss of victory point if the player immediately joins a bloc that is war. Okay, so here now it's specified what's in there. Yeah, I read this after this and was confused and did not see this secondary, this final line when I was reading it to myself. A player that is not at war is neutral, or a power that is not at war is neutral. Now, there's nothing that says a bloc can't be neutral, which is, again, why I don't like the chit cup answer to blocs. No matter what, right? All powers that are uncontrolled will always be neutral, since all powers at war must be controlled by players. Right. The reverse is not true, since any power, even players, can be neutral. Since all allied powers are at war with exactly the same enemies, it follows that that doesn't seem right. See, over here, a bloc is an alliance. Whether the bloc, if neutral, should join another bloc when attacked or remain in its own bloc, that's different. No. Whether to accept a peace, no. Whether the bloc should join one of its members in a declaration of war made by it. My feeling is that this is determinant here. That all allied powers must be at war with exactly the same enemies, which isn't stated before, but it's stated here as a since clause, right? It follows that all members of an alliance will be neutral if one of them is. What that means to me, oh, we're going to get there. Hold on. We're going to get to what I was stressing over. It is actually specified. It seems to me that if a bloc refuses to support an offensive war, the member who went out on the offensive war is now on their own and is no longer part of the bloc. They become their own bloc. They leave that alliance. But does that count as breaking an alliance because the bloc decided to do that? I don't fucking know. Okay. also follows that an alliance and a bloc is either neutral or at war. Now here we go to the thing that I was having a problem with. A neutral bloc will move on neutral impulses. Neutral powers can never enter the territory of others, and their territory can never be entered by any other power. That sounds like the bloc, although allied, can't support each other until somebody's at war, which feels restrictive. And then it also says it'll move on neutral impulses, which is a direct contradiction of the managing initiative here, which doesn't say anything about neutral blocks and whatever's here, which seems to indicate that the bloc has to move even when neutral, using a coalition or empire choice. Blah, 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 just wrong, bad. The rules just, they directly contradict themselves. Declarations of war. When a player declares war on any other powers, it will automatically cause all members of the attacker's bloc to be at war with all members of the defender's bloc. Not true. Again, the bloc has an option to refuse to enter an offensive war. If any player allies of either attacker or defender do not approve of such a war, see above for the consequences. Yeah, the bloc stays together. The player who declared war has to be the one who's loosed. Note that Austria and Turkey may place free units at the outbreak of a war, and in Turkey's case may place them at any time during the war. That's the feudal and territory and I don't know, border units or whatever that Austria has. There are three special cases of a declaration of war that demand further attention. The target is a member of a bloc, and maybe this will answer the questions, but it's like, it's going to answer them by violating a prior rule, if it does. The target is a member of a bloc that is neutral. That bloc must choose to either join a bloc that is already at war with the attacker's bloc or remain a separate bloc. They can still join another bloc in later diplomacy phases if they wish by concluding an alliance with a member of such bloc. That other bloc has to allow them in, too. The target isn't, it's like, it looks like there's another special set of voting that happens with both sides of the bloc. The target is an uncontrolled minor power. You must determine who will control the power. The minor power becomes a controlled ally of the winning major power and joins the bloc. This sounds like empires in arms. Control will go to the player with the best national modifier towards that minor power, and that is at war with the attacker. If tied, determine control randomly. Okay, well, again, this could have been worded better. It would go to the player who is at war with the attacker with a preference to the best national modifier. That's how it should be written. But of course, nothing in this rule book is written well. If no one is at war with the attacker, the player with the best national modifier wins control, whether they want to or not, and will now be at war with the attacker. If tied, determine control randomly. If the winning major power does not want to be at war with the attacker, it can decline control, in which case it goes to the next best modifier. So it's similar to the die rolls in an EU or empires in arms, where if you don't support the defense, other players get an option at it. Actually, I don't remember with empires in arms because I have a feeling that, like, the winner of it, if they don't, something feels like if the winner of it doesn't support, it just surrenders, which is different from EU. But I may be misremembering how a game worked out. It may have involved a power taking the defenses and then surrendering, basically, the minors by misplaying them. It was a really horrible, like, as soon as that deal was brokered, I was like, this is stupid. If no major power outside the attacker's own bloc will take control, the minor counts as conquered immediately. That is the case in both EU and EIA. Okay, if the target is an uncontrolled major power, the procedure is exactly as with minor powers, but control can only go to a player and cannot be denied. I have no idea what that means. I'm not going to worry about it because there aren't going to be any uncontrolled major powers. But whatever it's supposed to indicate, it kind of looks like it's going to force the winning player into a war. So like, if someone attacks Turkey, whoever has the best modifier on Turkey has to go to war if there's no one who's already at war, because you can't deny it. And then that leaves another problem, which a lot of these games have. There are powerful minors, right? Sweden is a relatively powerful state, and it looks just like the Russians. Fucking hell. The color looks exactly the same. You got the same problem with War and Peace, but anyway. Sweden's a relatively powerful nation. If Russia declares war on Sweden and nobody's willing to go to war with Russia, Sweden will just surrender and become conquered. Now, Finland will end up being absorbed and Sweden will become a Russian minor. But that feels, I don't know, unlikely, to say the least. All right. I'm not even sure in EU you can, in EU you can control a minor and it'll operate on its own. In EIA that may not be the case. Then there's a big example of diplomacy, which I did not read recently. I read it earlier, long ago. Minor countries are conquered as per the main rule book. Major powers, the alliance credit rule cannot be used, and surrender conditions are the same as the main rule book. I think the reason you can't use the minor, I'm not sure why you can't use the alliance credit. It won't make sense for me because players are controlling all the majors. I'm going to play the full 7 powers or whatever. But if you had like 4 or 5 players in it, the additional powers, I would think they could use that alliance credit because that indicates how long and how much they're willing to stay in the alliance. During each conquest and peace phase, if the surrender conditions are not fulfilled, the major powers can propose peace based on status quo ante, reverts to the situation that existed prior to the war, including possible conquered minors. These powers can no longer declare war on each other until the next spring diplomacy phase. Well, now this is weird. Remember, no, spring diplomacy phase is not the spring interphase. It's the diplomacy phase in spring. Okay, never mind. And the continental system cannot be put into effect. It's automatically put into effect according to earlier rules. These major powers can freely exchange provinces during the conquest phase. A change of alliance by minor countries between major powers, though, is not allowed. So you can do the status quo ante and then reposition provinces. Just a mess to me. All right. During winter conquest and peace, certain powers can, if they or their allies are in possession of specific provinces, can create new states. This is usually a French satellite or a normal controlled minor ally. They're treated like normally controlled allies or satellites. Sometimes these states get new units that can be produced. When the rules below control the territories, this means that the territories are allied to a major power, or that the capital city and all fortresses within that province or minor country are conquered by a major power as per the main rule book. If a province is involved, it must have been assigned to the victorious major power after a peace treaty. Military control is not enough. A minor allied to a major power can be stripped of one of its provinces, except for the province containing its capital city, in order to build this new entity, unless this, it can be stripped, except for that, in order to build this new entity, unless this province is itself part of the new entity. That, the grammar to that leaves it completely. A minor allied to a major can be stripped of one of its provinces, except for its capital, in order to build a new entity, unless this province is itself part of the new entity. So you're allowed to do it to build the entity, and you can only build the entity out of provinces that are part of it, but you can't do it if the province is part of it. That sentence is just self-contradictory, like entirely, and really horribly constructed. I'll make my best guess about it, that you can strip a minor ally's territory. So like Bavaria can lose Berg in order to create the Rhine Confederation. On the other hand, it's forbidden to remove a province from a minor country to annex it to the controlling major power's national territory or to cede it as an agreement with another major power. But you can strip it to cede it as a major power as part of the peace terms. That's one of the things that's allowed. So again, there's a whole rule that allows what this denies. We have the specifics for each of these. I'm not going to go into them. I'm just so fucking sick of this game at this point. Like just the rule book, it's just so fucking bad. But Italy is Lombardy, Romagna, Venice. And as long as France, okay, I will go into them. As long as France has Lombardy, they can create Italy and add other territories with a capital at Milan. It's got its own regular forces. Venice, yeah, Venice shouldn't be in the game. Now, what's interesting here, once Venice is added to Italy, a second infantry corps becomes available, which replaces the Venetian corps, which is removed from the game. I think Venice has disappeared at this point, but I don't know. Like, if I look here, Venice is now a part of Austria as opposed to this. That's fine. It's been absorbed. The only way that could have actually happened, if we were playing some sort of grand campaign that we can postulate, is that a Kingdom of Italy was formed with Venice. That's not what happened. So again, we're finding something that prevents the grand campaign. There would have to be a whole bunch of additional rules in play, not just maybe something that allows Egypt, something that allows Poland and stuff like that I had postulated before. Which, you know, again, the thing I wanted out of this game, it doesn't exist, and you can kind of see why they shied away from it. There isn't an easy solution to make a grand campaign that runs through, although the game feels like it's designed to have one. In 1805, the Kingdom of Italy is created. I think it was created before that. It includes Lombardy and Romagna. It ceases to exist when all its components have been conquered, even if one of the entities is unconquered. It'll continue in its reduced state. At the moment it's conquered, all Italian units are removed from the game, which again makes it feel like Venice has been destroyed as a power, and then Italy can be destroyed as a power. So, like, maybe I should just remove those Venetian counters. There's no way for Austria to resuscitate Venice as a state. It has absorbed Venice in the course of the earlier situations. Let me, I gotta switch batteries. As an example of what's fucked up about this, the Venetian Navy is a white bordered 1792 until the end of the game is supposedly available. But there's no way to play a game that bridges between revolutionary and imperial scenarios. And at the start of 1805, when the imperial scenarios come into play, Venice no longer exists and has been removed from the game. This is kind of the feeling I have with the Duke of Orange, or the Prince of Orange. Well, maybe both. He's like Duke of Nassau or something like that. I don't know. But that he should just be gone. But again, he has this weird counter. And there is a Prince of Orange when you get to the Waterloo situation. But I think that only happens after France's surrender, that Holland gets re-established. Well, that Holland gets established in place of the Batavian Republic. Okay, where the hell are we? Yeah, it looks like if Italy gets beaten, but it gets destroyed, it's gone forever, and those just become they become provinces without military. Now, the big question then is, hey, Piedmont has been absorbed. Does that get reestablished? If, Italy is broken up. Only France can create the Confederation of the Rhine. It's Berg, Cleves, and Thuringia. Wow, that sounds mighty. Not the Confederation of the Rhine that I'm used to. Which should include Westphalia, for example, right? And in Empires in Arms, it is a bigger grouping of minor powers. Confederation of the Rhine is capital at Erfurt. Once it's formed, its counters are available and can be produced. My throat's killing me. I gotta stop. Each member of the Confederation remains autonomous and is conquered only after losing its own capital and after its fortresses are captured. It ceases to exist for the rest of the game when all its members have been conquered by an enemy coalition. At that time, it's removed from the game. Okay. It really looks like these created minors are one use. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more of these. The reason we're still looking at these is the victory conditions. Now, there were victory conditions in the basic rules. I think these are the multiplayer victory conditions. But, like, this part of the rules is not the multiplayer stuff. It's just, like, for all the games, I guess. Only France can create Westphalia. Following four must be conquered or allied: Magdeburg, Hanover, Brunswick, Hesse. You can build Westphalian, the Hessian, and the Brunswick unit, but not Hanoverian units. It disappears when castle is taken. The unit goes away, I guess, then. Kingdom of Bavaria can be created by France. They have to cede Austrian Tyrol to Bavaria, splitting Berg off from Bavaria and turning it into an independent state. But then Ansbach can be added to the kingdom. Oh, God. It's like, look, yeah, it happens, but, man, it's just such minor little things. I'm much happier. The big political stuff, I'm much happier with the area games. You wouldn't have an Ansbach in there. It would just be sort of abstracted away. Berg becomes a French ally and can become part of the Confederation. Kingdom. Now, when we played the 1792 scenario, I think Berg got stripped away from Bavaria because Bavaria got defeated or something. I don't know. Kingdom of Bavaria's capital is Munich. A revolt can erupt in Tyrol after the kingdom's formed. Bavaria follows general rules for the conquest of minor neutrals and is treated as a normal multi-province minor. Grand Duchy of Warsaw. Okay, here, winter of 1793, during the conquest phase, a first partition is executed and Russia receives Polesia and Podolia. Those are down here. I thought the first partition was earlier than this. This may be the second partition. While Prussia receives Posen and Austria receives Eastern Galicia. You know what? In the 1792 scenario, none of this happens. So again, this whole section that I kind of skipped because it's over in the playbook instead of the main roles isn't really referenced. And it isn't covered in here. Except for as Poland as a whole. And Poland as a whole, if we look, the national boundaries of Russia include Podolia and Polesia, include Lithuania. These are all provinces that I think can be added to Poland, but let's see. Okay, Poland is an independent state of all of these. In 1793, a first partition, Russia receives Polesia and Podolia, while Prussia gets Posen, Austria gets Eastern Galicia. In 1795, during conquest, Poland disappears and Russia gets Lithuania, Prussia gets Masovia, and Austria gets Western Galicia. I don't know. Anyway. Starting in 1805, France can create a Grand Duchy of Warsaw if she controls, not conquers. Controls means you don't have to actually defeat, you just have to own the province. Masovia during winter conquest phase of a turn. To conquer it, you would have to defeat Prussia, basically. Later, both, which you do have to do in Empires in Arms. You do have to get a peace result to create Poland. Later, both of the other provinces showing Polish eagles, Posen and Western Galicia, can be added to the Grand Duchy. The capital is Warsaw. As soon as it's created, all of the powers opposed to France have a +1 diplomacy for diplomatic action towards Russia, which makes sense because Russia has a major gripe about Poland existing. When the Grand Duchy is created, a 2-step infantry corps appears during the next spring reinforcement phase. This is different from everything else. Here a reinforcement appears instead of just going to the production value. Now the production value for Poland, well, here's the problem. It doesn't exist in 1806. It's split up. But in 1809, it's got the value of those 3 provinces. Anyway. And Poniatowski appears with it at the same time and place, unless Maria Waleska has been played. Other events can be produced during the budget phase as per normal. So they get an additional load of reinforcements, which allows them to build their army up big the way they were previously. Now, I gave them the full production of all of Poland, which probably is their 1792 total. Over here, this 1806, which should have been triggered into something smaller by that point. But I don't know. It's just like Brest-Litovsk is part of Lithuania. Well, the Russians weren't in that first scenario, in the 1792 scenario. So no biggie for that, I guess. The only thing that happened was the Austrians faced a nastier Poland than they probably should have. And given the results of the scenario as a whole and the results of the Polish attack, I don't think it had too much impact, although it did drain away some of the Austrian troops. Poland ceases to exist when all her provinces are conquered. It doesn't say that she's removed from the game, though, unlike the others. Yet the Polish stay in play alongside French units until their destruction. They can never receive replacements nor be rebuilt, which sounds kind of like they're out of the game. It's just, it allows them to fight on once they're destroyed. But it's not clear that it can't be reconstituted again. Only Turkey can create the Ottoman Empire when it is conquered or allied. Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Cyrenaica, Tripolitania, Egypt, Palestine, and Syria. The empire ceases to exist when it's lost at least one of these territories, but it can be formed again later in the game. So long as the empire exists during each winter victory phase, Turkey receives a victory point. The Orange Republic. Only Britain can create this kingdom when it's conquered or is allied to Holland and Flanders. It cannot break its alliance with Britain. If conquered, it cannot be reconstituted, and its capital is Amsterdam. Dalmatia. If France has annexed Illyria, which might be difficult to do, because there is a minor next to them, but I don't remember the peace conditions entirely. I think it's got to be possible. She can create Dalmatia and produce the corresponding unit. It ceases to exist when conquered by another major power, which annexes its national territory. This absorption is free of peace conditions. No clue what that's meant to say. You can't conquer something. Well, no, it's a minor country. Okay. Yeah, you can. As soon as this occurs, Dalmatian unit is permanently removed from the game. Kingdom of Two Sicilies. In 1792, Naples controls Sicily. If it's conquered, Sicily becomes a minor country allied to Britain with a capital at Palermo. It has no units. Power that controls Naples can reinstate Naples as an allied minor country and build the units. And we have them, I think they're pro-French at this point. I don't know. It's going to be set up over there. Piedmont, Sardinia. When Piedmont is conquered and annexed to France, Sardinia remains at war with France and becomes a minor country allied to Britain. Among the Piedmontese units, only the detachment is available. Whoa! Okay. This Coley guy. Okay, now this is weird again. Again, I have a leader. I think Piedmont is gone because it's been annexed, but the Brits will have this available. Is Sweden really my ally? But similar to like the Duke of or the Prince of Orange, I don't know what's up with Coley. Is he like available? Sure, he's not. It's not going to make that big a difference. But again, you know, it's like these things are kind of piecemeal and all over the place. Piedmontese leaders are permanently removed from the game. So yeah, so he should not exist. He should not have a white marker, because by the 1805 scenario, he's out. He's gone. Similar to the Venetian Navy. And again, even if you were playing like some kind of imagined grand campaign, it wouldn't make a damn bit of difference. Well, it would. It would. Yeah. So if there was a grand campaign that existed, those white-colored markers would make sense because, for example, Piedmont might still exist as a country going into 1805. But the red striped counters, there are no rules in place, and because there's no grand campaign, for removing them between, within one great campaign. There's no rules for making leaders disappear. So that would again be something that would have to be put in place. And they're really largely a mechanism for leaders who aren't to be set up in the 1805 scenario. That switch between the difference between red and white. White border just means they're set up in the 1805. And there's not really something that says, oh, this leader should be removed on this date because he died of old age. So like Suvorov would die of old age. You don't want the Russians to have that leader until like he becomes a casualty. He would never become a casualty because he's going to be an army leader, right? So like, yeah, there would have to be other mechanisms there as well for all those leaders. And that's going to be problematic in terms of trying to put together. So like the red band leaders include people who died or retired, possibly due to military action at some point before 1805. The white band leaders are ones who were in the revolutionary scenarios and then are also in the imperial era scenarios. And that's all it means. So like most of those leaders wouldn't actually be removed. They'd still be functional and around. The final thing we go to, my battery's not charging, which is a problem, is Hanover, and then I'll come back for the victory conditions. Hanover is a minor country which has combat units only if allied to Britain or Prussia. In all other circumstances, it's considered a minor power with no units available. Fairly straightforward. It doesn't seem like it's dissolved. It seems like, Prussia or Britain can reconstitute Hanover whenever they like. All right, we'll come back for the victory. The things you can see, though, is this section of the rules where, the multiplayer diplomacy, etc., and then these minors come in. This whole section that's in the playbook is even in worse quality or of worse quality than what the main rule book was, right? So to some extent, you might say, look, this should just be a two-player game. And it might be a better game two-player because then it has that weird sort of alliance. I don't remember what the term is. What do they call it? Alliance credits, which is like how much that major power can like be beat up on, presumably by France. But I mean, it could be Turkey being beaten up by Austria or something, or Russia, before it like wants to bail out of a war. Which is a kind of a nice mechanism in a two-player game. If you think about War and Peace, the two-player version, Empires in Arms doesn't have a two-player version. I mean, you can do it, but it shouldn't. It's fucked up because Britain can probably keep France from being able to win using their special capability, which is useless in the multiplayer game. But it is designed as a multiplayer game. But in War and Peace, the miners are too subjected to diplomacy, which they're not in this. Instead, they're subjected in this to conquest or to this alliance credits, which really is kind of the mechanism by which you can beat Russia and knock them out of the war and get the Treaty of Tilsit type situation. All right, anyway, I'm done for a while here. It is, I don't know, I don't even know what time it is. It's sometime in the morning. Fuck. Anyway, I found out just a few minutes ago my dad finally died, and you know, it's been a couple of months, several months of him in the ICU, and yeah, so that's pretty shitty. I mean, it's not in the sense that like he wasn't gonna get better, you know, but I don't know if he was suffering all that much. It was definitely harder on my brother than it was on me because I'm fucking useless. Let me, I'll get to the victory conditions in a moment. Let's move my tea closer. I was hurting myself already, or before that tonight, badly ruined something else. Okay, so for the victory conditions, 1792, 1798, those are the two scenarios we did, have their own victory conditions and don't apply to this, or don't apply these. Now, if we look here, fuck, the map needs fixing. Victory in two-player games has its own rules, which we went over, which is pretty limited, okay? There's a certain set of automatic victories that happen for the French or for the coalition if they conquer France, but otherwise, France has to control every capital city's fortress hex in the Grand Empire territory, which is not just France itself, but some of the surrounding territories. But it's different. And this is kind of nice because this is one of the problems I had. We'll see. We'll see if it forces it that way. So, War and Peace, which is the game that this is the closest to, has victory conditions of if France holds Paris at the end of the game, they win. And this is really kind of weird because that game allows for, like, you know, the Waterloo, the 100 Days and all that. Anyway, I don't want to think too much about it. But in these other three campaign scenarios, 1805, 1809, 1813, they all end at the same time. There are 17 cities with a red star, and they list them here, but we can find Lyon as one of them. Okay. Well, that's great. There's 17 key hexes, not even key cities, key hexes. There are 12 victory it doesn't tell us what's up with them. It just tells us they exist. But that might be important for other rules. But these are key hexes. It doesn't say key cities, which is something that we had, and key provinces, which I believe are provinces with a key city. I think these are the key provinces, which matter for something else. Okay, there are 12 victory hexes that are identified with a gold star. Okay? When a victory objective states that a hex must be controlled, it means the player must have annexed it, have a miner that as an ally that controls it, or occupy it with a supplied combat unit or a friendly active fortress. Great. All right, you can try to get automatic victory. The major power has to control all key hexes in its national territory, but not victory hexes, whatever they are. We're going to give victory points for them if the game goes long enough, if it doesn't hit an automatic victory. But then they also all have specific objectives, because you start the game with all your key hexes. The British must have more fleets on the map than any other major power, including those in Foreign Wars box and the off-map boxes. Okay, they're going to just have that. And they must control the following victory hexes: Antwerp, Gibraltar, Cairo, Lisbon, Hamburg, and Amsterdam. In the 1792 scenario, they're close to this. I don't think they have Cairo, and they don't have Antwerp, but everything else they have. So naturally, they're very close to it. The hard part, though, is Cairo is going to be, I think it's not British. Not sure. Yeah, Cairo is Turkish. No, it's neutral at this point. Okay. So you've got to do some expeditions in North Africa. France. France has to have built the Grand Empire, which means he has annexed into his national territory all territories on the map marked as GE, or 1805 and GE. Flanders, Holland. Okay. Holland is not, and I don't know if he can, unless it says GE on it. So it says French GE there, but Holland is actually a minor neutral right now in this scenario. Pro-French, or a minor ally. That's kind of weird. I think if we look at the rules, I had to absorb it. If it's got that GE. And this is where life just gets stupid, right? Where is the conquest? Oh, where conquest is. Where's economics? Production. Conquest, yeah. Okay, so this is the base rules for minor countries. A minor country is conquered if certain things happen. If the minor power is located within the Grand Empire area, Flanders, Piedmont, Genoa, Tuscany, Papacy, Geneva, and Neuchâtel, it must be integrated into France's national territory, whether this minor has troops or not. Now, Holland had a GE on it. It's not in that list. It says French GE. Flanders doesn't. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Neuchâtel has it, French GE. No, Flanders has it here. Austrian, French 1805, and GE. Yeah. And this is going to be French GE. So, technically, I don't think I should be allowed to have the Batavian Republic still existing, because it is located within the Grand Empire area. Maybe, except it's not here. It's not in this list. It must be integrated into France's national territory, whether it has troops or not. If it's not adjacent to national territory, it cannot become a province. So here's the thing. Holland is a minor with troops. It's not allowed to be absorbed except if it's located within the Grand Empire. Now, for victory conditions here, this is where it's problematic again. France has built the Grand Empire, which means he has annexed into its territory all on the map marked as GE or 1805 GE: Flanders, Holland, Hansa, Geneva, Neufchâtel, Piedmont, Genoa, Tuscany, and the Papacy. I can't absorb Holland by those rules, and I must to win the game. Is there a card that does it? I don't know, maybe. Not very helpful, though, you know, when I see a direct conflict like that. And Britain's been conquered, or the continental system has been in effect for 2 winter victory phases. Continental system, as defined, just kind of happens. It doesn't have any prerequisites. It's in play in the 1805 scenario. So that's nothing, right? The only thing I can say is continental system in effect for what? If you're looking at what France's real goal would be, it's for the continental system to cover all of Europe. But that's not what's been spelled out here. And if we look at the continental system, and this is, again, this game just doesn't work as written at all, right? Fuck. Continental system can be dictated by France as a peace treaty condition. A minor power allied to France is automatically part of the continental system. I mean, it just kind of exists, right? And there's nothing in here that talks about, you know, this victory condition any further. All this says is, or the continental system has been in effect, which means that France wins the game in 2 years after the beginning of the game, unless that rule is incorrectly written. Therefore, what do I look at it as? All major powers except Britain, but that may be too big. So maybe some proportion of them, like 3 of the 5 remaining major powers or something like that. I got no idea. I got no idea, you know? And look, I can run downstairs and I can look in the, and I'll do that. I can look in the other, you know, the rewrite and see what they chose to do. That's about all I have as an option, because the rules are just absolutely fucking wrong. This part of the rule book, well, the playbook stuff in the rule book is just so fucking bad. Okay, well, there was a rule co-located with these, not with the victory conditions over here, they're written the same, that said the continental system is established if, and it runs all ports from St. Petersburg to, and I don't know where it went to, because I was expecting to find it here, and I do not. But also, that established was made as a limitation on the French being able to get any money from the continental system, which is a big difference. If the continental system's not established, the British don't get trade for the stuff that's under the continental system, and the French don't get it either. But if it's established, if it covers enough of the map, then it counts as French trade instead of British trade, which is a very, very powerful option. I'm going to look to see if I can find that rule, because I kind of remember reading it before. But it's not where I expected it. It's hidden somewhere else. Established is what's used in the Banania rules. It's not what's used in the victory points here. In the victory points here it is, or the continental system has been in effect for at least 2 winter terms. And also, there was no clear, like, fixing for this. There were some added places in red or something. I don't know. Um, it, it's got modifications. You know, it's on version 4, so this may be changes from version 3 to version 4 that are being highlighted there. Just more things that were caught that needed to be fixed. But I don't know, you know, how that reflects to this. It's totally fucking useless for this particular thing, because I tried to look for, first of all, where I was looking in the economic section, it doesn't talk about it. Now, I thought I read this rule before, but maybe I saw it in the Banania rules, and I'm just remembering now. Over here, I found two things. Establishment of the continental system. That's the wording that the Banania rules use for the victory condition, not in existence, as if that's a different thing. By the defeated major power and its minor allies, this counts as one peace condition, which makes it sound like, okay, as long as one player is in the system. The Banania rules also state that all French allies have to be in it. That's not the case under these rules. And in fact, probably shouldn't be, because Spain didn't really accept it. And that's part of the reason why France invades Spain. And of course, Russia didn't accept it, but they were, you know, they were under a mandatory peace condition that they voided it or whatever. And then here, they've got this CS. These points go to France if the continental system is established in that country. Which again, you know, whatever they're using the established rules wording for in the Banania rules, as far as I'm concerned, they're adding something to the game with them. There's not enough there. Now, I'm willing to accept to win the game, you need the whole shebang, and maybe even to get the economic boost from it. I was giving the economic boost. Actually, I wasn't playing with the continental system, but I would have been giving the economic boost for everything, because that's how it's worded in the economics here. No trade is gained by Britain if part of the continental system, France, receives trade for each harbor, which represents an increase in French trade over French allies. Those pounds are reminded in the major power resource with an XCS. I mean, it's clear that this is not like, you know, errata that didn't touch all kind of places. They've explicitly gone out of their way to create this, to use this established term in a different way. What does it mean for me? I don't know. There's so much in this game that's just broken. All right, Russia must never have been conquered, but a status quo peace doesn't count, and must control Warsaw and either Constantinople or Paris. Yeah, okay. Austria must control the following victory hexes: Dresden, Munich, Venice. All of that sounds possible. Mantua, Rome, and either Lyon or Paris. So again, France has to fall for them to get the victory points. This is not required for the British to win. They can win basically by taking Cairo, taking Hamburg back, and Amsterdam back. And that's it. Which is a pretty minor requirement compared to, the French one may be minor too, but compared to like the Russian and Austrian, it seems minor. For Prussia must control the following victory hexes: Warsaw, Dresden, Hanover, Hamburg, and Paris. Again, we have to defeat France. England doesn't care about defeating France. The one country that stays at war with them throughout this entire period. Spain must control the following: Lisbon, Gibraltar, and either Bordeaux, Naples, or Rome. Okay, for the Spanish to win, they have to beat the English. This is kind of cool because it puts them in the French camp as they were historically for the beginning of the war. Turkey must have created the Ottoman Empire. I assume it still has to be there, and must control the following victory hexes: Kiev and Odessa or Vienna. Well, that's feels more possible. And now that's control the victory point hexes, right? Which is not conquer, which means you can win in the middle of a war. Non-automatic victory. If no major power gets an automatic victory prior to 1814 winter, victory is determined among the players by tallying the victory points each one has accumulated. Hey, shouldn't we go to 15? It doesn't. We can look at the scenario. It goes. They all end in 14. Why do we have a 15 marker? I don't know. Some victory points are awarded during the game and are recorded on the record track, while others cannot be awarded until game end. Major power with the most victory points will win. Hex control. You get a victory point for each key or victory city, victory hex controlled, including a hex which is in its national territory. Except if a power other than France controls Paris, it gets 3 victory points instead of 1. Covered. If several allied major powers occupy a hex, the victory point is given to the power which commands the occupying force. Loss of victory points. Each major power loses a victory point for each key or victory hex within its 1805 national territory that it does not control. Okay. It's kind of a pain in the ass because the original boundaries are kind of a more, I don't know, are an easier thing to see, which means I'm going to have to be constantly looking back, well, when I'm counting the victory points, which is probably just once at the end of the game. I'm going to have to be looking back and seeing what was the status of that territory in 1805, which isn't terrible, but breaking an alliance, you lose a victory point. It costs 1 victory point to that country, except for an Entente or mandatory alliance. Well, Ententes aren't alliances, so you can't break them that way. And a mandatory alliance, I think you can only break after a period. And it depends on how you break it, so it's not, this isn't absolute. Economic reform. Twice per campaign scenario during the spring budget turn, and once in the 1809-1813, a major power can attempt an economic reform. If the reform succeeds, the major power receives a victory point. The whole budget is dedicated to reform, and a major power cannot build any units during the corresponding year. You roll a die, on a 4 through 6, you succeed. So, you don't get any cash, and you don't get any new units. It's pretty harsh. For a victory point, twice in the game. Spanish liberation. The winner of the Liberation War, if the winner of the Liberation War is not Spain, it gets a victory point. If Spain wins the Liberation War, it gets 3 victory points. We don't really remember what the Liberation War was. The major powers allied to Spain receive a victory point each if they have an army in Spain and 1 victory point for an army in a French province adjacent to Spain. Yeah, under what conditions? If you're allied to Spain, you get victory points for being in Spain or France without regard to the Liberation War? Or is it only if the Spanish win the Liberation War? And does it really, does it actually make sense if maybe you're an ally that came along after the Liberation War was done? Just weird shit, man. Weird shit. Ottoman Empire. Turkey. If Turkey has built the Ottoman Empire, it receives 3 victory points. That's not what it says over here. Just isn't. Here, not the 19.16, which is not so the rules reference that's given here is wrong, and the rule is different. As long as the empire exists during each winter victory phase, Turkey receives 1 victory point. Very, very different. Which one? Navies. The major power with the most fleets on map and in off-map and foreign war boxes gets a whole victory point. And then we get to the scenarios. Take a peek at War of Liberation. Is that in here? I think it is. That's Spanish instability. I don't remember what that is, but I'm not seeing the Liberation War there. I don't think it was here. No, it's not here. Maybe it's Spanish instability. I doubt it. 14.4, oh yeah, 14.42 on page 45. Good enough. So Spain can be diplomaticized at reduced value. Liberation War, Spanish instability check has occurred and is successful. So if like the French are in there and Spain gets destabilized. Okay. Generally, again, the playbook rules make a lot less sense. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I really don't. I don't know whether to take the Banania rules into play. It would seem to me like it's pretty easy to keep one country conquered for two winters. I don't know. Mandatory pieces, how long are they? Feels fucking useless. Like, it really does. Roll a d6. No, that's to extend a mandatory piece. Territorial conditions. War indemnities, aid, continental, extending a mandatory piece. Oh, that's mandatory piece. No, we're talking mandatory alliance. Which will take effect at the end of the mandatory peace derived. It's a 2 peace conditions. Why am I looking this up? There was some reason. Oh yeah. Yeah, because a mandatory alliance would give you the continental system. But the mandatory peace is really the issue here. Let me roll a third d6 to extend the mandatory peace. Where is the mandatory peace? There we go. Okay, it's 2 dice with a minimum of 6 turns, which is a year and a half. So it's pretty easy, especially if you take the extension, to get a 2-year mandatory peace where they can't break the continental system, right? I believe so. Continental system is just sort of there. And I don't remember there being some condition to get rid of that outside of the mandatory piece. I don't know. All right, let's load this up. But as you can see, I'm pretty fucking uncertain about what the hell I'm doing with this one. You know, I thought the 1792 scenario was particularly problematic, but now I'm coming to the conclusion that, to be honest, the campaign rules are at least as bad. Because they, okay, take the multiplayer out of it. The two-player campaign rules, you get rid of all the diplomacy stuff. And that means that the victory conditions are more concise as well, right? You don't have this shit like France has to have the continental system, right? I think. Let's look at the victory conditions here. Continental system has been in for at least 2 winter phases. Yeah, again. And look, to make that of any importance, taking all of Europe, and I think that's actually what it is. I think it's something like Salonika to St. Petersburg or something along those lines. Has to be has to be part of the continental system. I don't know. All right, up it goes.